Welcome to the New Kevin Smith, The Great Witness Show. I'm Dean Bell, and we have here Dean Kevin, who will be sharing his real side experiences with us. Welcome, Dean Kevin. You have an experience for us today.
In this real side experience, I would find myself with a group of individuals on their respective awareness processes, as invariably I always tend to be operating with such groups with my various assignments and activities. For of course, if I decide on a certain idea or intent through the personal self, this will affect simulated experience in accordance and as a reflection of this intent placement. The intent, as everything idea created, already is the completion of itself in reality, as everything is, but creation is constructed and has been decided through the consciousness that effects roll out sequentially from the causes in time phases, individual scenes that build upon themselves and progress from the idea's conception to its completion. A movie is contained in its entirety on the disc, the culmination of what was decided initially where the movie began already has the effected consequence, the end of the movie, just as it is in reality. But the awareness encased in the consciousness, a consciousness decided as to these sequences or stages that lead to the culmination intent actualized point, rather has to go through then this movie. For if agreement is secured between all involved, that will have as a movie example the evil empire of the Star Wars series defeated. That is instantly so in reality, but also decided between all involved is the stages by which this must take place, the mechanics, distance, time, all these additional decided limitations, details, and variables. And as I said, the real awareness is this isness everything position, where everything is available, everything the consciousness comprises of now, all the ideas, agreements, as from the real awareness view, everything is the completeness of itself, as though what can be viewed are the conclusions of every movie simultaneously that every idea in creation effects into a being. The real awareness, or the real guides, can then select what of the everything that the consciousness of ideas is now, and the personal self can be shown that which makes the most sense, awareness speaking, for it to see. A case of selecting the specific idea, the agreements, and like a room full of TVs, which contains all the ideas of the consciousness effecting into a simulation, which would be akin to the real awareness everything creational overview, so can a specific idea or TV be isolated and the personal self be shown, and where necessary will the personal self directly be operating in creation, rather than just being shown creational happenings. From this, aside from creation, real awareness position, if it is required to engage with individuals, etc. Generally, individuals are accessible as we simply step into our consciousness, like putting on our virtual reality simulator headsets. For our consciousness is a part of all consciousness that affects this shared simulator. As to be a part of any simulator, so must the specific ideas that pertain to it, the particular simulator files or programs that are generating it, be agreed to, that we experience then the simulated multi-dimensional life-level environments as they currently are decided through the consciousness to be. And of course, if these particular idea files that make up this particular creational realm as it is currently decided to be are agreed to, that we formulate then this consciousness, we are projecting a body form into this shared simulator arena that has the capacity to decipher or decode the files into a simulation, and we then are operating in a vast multi-dimensional game that we share with all whose consciousness contains the same simulator files or ideas. For if ideas are the same, the affected experience must be also, and all consciousness makes up the building blocks of the simulator collectively affected. So this is an intermeshing of all consciousness in each simulator, which is agreement then, which has no individual body form beyond the experiential reach of any other. And with this overall arena stage set, shared by all, so then each creates as they will, and the extent to which experience between two individuals converge depends on the extent by which these additional agreements are the same or similar. All body forms operating in the overall arena, but certain idea agreements can have individuals with very different species and positions within the simulator. The greater the difference between the ideas of the consciousness that are in addition to the simulator consciousness template files, the greater the experience between the individuals must also differ. And so, as ideas, intent, and agreements converge, so will experience. And as we set intent through the personal self that aligns with the real purpose and real intent of the real awareness, which is the recognition of the true reality life is, that the real awareness is a part of, we will come into a conjunction with those who share the same intent, inclination, and with all the additional agreement ideas, as everyone's journey is unique. So, as much as we share the overall same real purpose of is recognizing intent and certain objectives and projects to facilitate the earning of the awareness to that end, so certain other beneficial ideas decided on may differ, and so we have our various real side experiences with others as they share agreement with the particular idea we are deciding on, and others may pop in and out at certain stages as what they are doing idea-wise converges or not with ours, and vice versa. And so I find that certain experiences tend to have a certain group of those who are agreeable with that specific objective, but that the groups comprise of different individuals than certain other assignments, such as perhaps rescue efforts, etc., that are taken on. And although I tend generally not identify the individuals, I have the real awareness impression of the different individuals that participate in all the various opportunities the guides provide, where we all have the chance to assist with the various galactic operations. The group and I, in this experience, would initially have a debriefing by an individual, a woman, and we would be ascending what seem to be golden ladders to reach this position where this was to be held, as much as being elevated from the ground represents getting aside from the personal self-consciousness, positioning oneself for the greater real awareness overview. This would be a similar representation, for if we are immersed in the personal self, if we are generating ideas through it, or clinging to the ideas of the consciousness, we are locked into the limitation that these ideas effect. We cannot then be in this nowness, real awareness position, which is where we need to operate from to be shown most effectively that which the guides wish us to see, and the extent to which we maintain this nowness, real awareness position dictates how much personal self-illusionary overlap filters and obscures the guide-provided experiences to the extent that we can overlap it completely, as we stand completely in the ideas of the consciousness. And indeed, the journey to the recognition of the ease is often literally presented as the climbing of a huge mountain, as we become more so removed from the consciousness, as we continuously let it go. Creation represented by the ground we are elevating ourselves from as we scale our ease mountain, and so to have as an undiluted a guide-provided experience as possible, we need to get as much as we are able out of the personal self, to place all ideas, thoughts, and emotions aside. And this was represented here as we ascended our golden ladders, and gold is the colour most associated with anything that pertains to the process of awareness and is recognition, almost as an indicator, just as white also can be, white which best represents purity. Anyway, the woman who was to speak with the group and I, my real awareness impressions assured me was a real guide, as regardless of external form, the guides have a unique, is-recognitional standing and signature that the real awareness, which is a part of this isness, the guides are a part of also, can discern. She would explain to us how we are to attempt to make contact with a particular group of aliens to effectively garner their agreement. For there are all manner of beings and what we would term alien body types with various intents and inclinations, and despite many having their controlling and destructive attitudes and agendas, some are stepping up and agreeing to supporting Duane and the guides with the galactic operations and to assist in offsetting the dire situations that face the Earth. And of course, the bigger picture being the recognition of the is. That is the sole purpose for all real awareness, the purpose of the simulator, regardless of body type. And such a process will be a releasing of the restriction that is the ideas that all consciousness comprises of, a restriction that effects into a simulator's demise. As a consciousness is the simulator, and although the consciousness will still be present, it's as though the ideas it comprises of are no longer clung to as the process of releasing agreements proceeds. And just like a computer that is overburdened, as we have every file it contains simultaneously on the screen and opened, as we release these ideas, as we click them off, they still are there as files, but no longer on the screen, no longer clung to, and the strain on the computer is lessened. The strain on the simulator, which deteriorates through the restriction of all ideas clung to through the overall consciousness, can be reduced as each individual goes about their process of releasing the consciousness of ideas. But what transpires on the Earth in regards to the various alien elements and involvement is agreement, free will dependent, primarily for something to feature in a species' overall experience. If something indeed features on a vast scale, there must be agreements in that species' consciousness for it to be so. The controllers already have secured agreement throughout the consciousness that permits them the ability to control, as this is their intent and inclination. And so, like a contract, like a script between all participants, the simulation rolls out in accordance with the idea agreements installed, which are the programs of the consciousness, which generate the game all participants experience. And so, in regards to ill-intended aliens and their adverse activities, they are far more likely to be able to become human experience, as very likely the ill-intended aliens are affiliated with the dark forces, and the dark forces already have agreements generally that allow their continued control of the human species, and if the agreement parameters, the specifics within the human consciousness, allows such ill-intended additional alien activities to occur, say a dark force orchestrated alien invasion, then the imposition of ill-intended aliens will be human experience. Not all the controllers' schemes can come to pass, as yes, they have overall control agreement, but for specific aspects of their agendas to become a human experience, they require specific agreement to them, and not always can they glean such. And so, the trick is to get agreement that becomes as idea files in the human consciousness that permits then experience of beneficial working with the guides and life aliens to be able to intercede on behalf of humans, and that the aliens in question also agree, as really it's all a computer type game that is effected into a simulation according to the idea files that make up its structure, and all participants are the pieces, the cogs of the effected game. As a consciousness are the files effected into a simulation, and all individual consciousness and what is decided between all involved become the idea files constructed that then have the game according then to agreement with all consciousness participants. For this is how creation works. Each individual has the mechanics to create what they want, through ideas decided on, and the simulation is effected accordingly, with then a simulation as according to each individual, as according to collective groups and entire species, and with the involvement of other species also. So is this one almighty arrangement of ideas, shared between all consciousness involved, and all dependent on agreement individually and collectively. In this experience, the group and I would be leaving 2 items leaning against a tree. We each had a different tree, and this was a representation of making a contact with this particular group of potentially stepping up aliens that the guides determined it was prudent to engage with. It wasn't that I had to recognize this representation, as the guide had already explained what we were doing, garnering agreement from these aliens. So a curious gesture, but perhaps the items had a greater significance than I can recall on waking as them having, as I don't recollect what they were. Maybe this was a kind of custom in regards to the particular aliens we were seeking to encourage as to their assistance with the plight of Earth. For the idea was, we would later return to these trees, and if the items were absent, if they had been accepted, so the aliens were agreeing to afford assistance. And so we would return to the trees. Some of the items were gone, some were not, an indication of the degree and extent of willingness on the part of these aliens. not absolute then, as some items remained, but it was a promising initial step overall, as most items were gone, and indeed there were scenes that followed where we were beamed aboard the ships of these aliens, as their fleet was stationed around the Earth, and would dialogue and converse with them. The aliens' identities were not shown to my personal self, and although the real awareness would know what species we were dealing with, as the real awareness is a part of all real awareness that is through all consciousness, and so can determine every idea the consciousness comprises of, can view every simulated situation effected from consciousness, including all body types. Sometimes certain details are withheld, for these aliens were considering venturing assistance, but still were reluctant and fearful, and it was prudent then to keep their identities concealed. The dark forces will also be this real awareness, as everything is. However, they will be disconnected from the real awareness that they are, and so the everything that creation consists of, idea-wise, that they could have had afforded them through their real awareness, is not available to their personal selves. And although all creational ideas are available, even absent of the real awareness, as every idea, decision, agreement will express multi-dimensionally as it does, and the dark forces are far more multi-dimensional, so can see far greater these ideas as they manifest throughout multi-dimensional creation, they would still have to sift through the muddle that is the endless manifestation of ever fluctuating ideas, agreements on the real side, like having all the jigsaw pieces from a million jigsaws dumped on the ground, and that they are also constantly changing as agreements fluctuate, and to locate the specific idea that might reveal a particular detail they are seeking. And many times what is seen on the surface is not what it actually is, as beings can alter and bend the simulated literal effects, as obfuscation tactics. The guides, for example, can conceal individuals almost in overlapping simulation that has them obscured from the view of the dark forces for protective purposes, as they occasionally do with individuals stepping up for the first time, who are at their most vulnerable, etc. Whereas a real awareness would have the complete picture of everything creational, and be able to show the personal self anything of it that is pertinent for it to be shown, every idea that is behind everything simulated surface presented. And so, if the personal self is shown the aliens involved, as the dark forces are of course always watching the simulated experiences we are given, as much as their recognition can allow, and are always listening to the Skypes and the shows, etc., they will learn too of the aliens intending to assist, no sorting through the ideas of creation necessary, and will move to discourage them if they indeed will present as opposition to the dark forces' continued controlling agenda rollout for humanity. And so it was deemed prudent for alien identity concealment in this case, as they already were a bit apprehensive about stepping up. All I can say is that they had amazing high-tech spacecraft, and as much as this was attempted preparation of agreement garnering for future view events to take place globally, that these aliens would make their presence known on a worldwide scale and be beneficial in their interjection into humanity's affairs, the future view I was actually afforded next was that of an altogether different alien species, these of a more ill-intended, dark force-backed persuasion. Again, everything is based on agreement. Every agreement is in effect now on the real side, in isness actuality terms, but processes through, as it will, to be physical level manifest, if the agreement is maintained. So all these future views, so-called, are not done deals. They are just views of agreements as they currently stand. And here, it seemed, the ill-intended alien invasion was in effect. The first phase of the invasion consisted of a mass abduction of humans on a massive scale, and then the humans would be returned, but somehow drone-like, controlled, very possibly through technology made into obedient, ill-intended alien drones. And as I was afforded this view, so would all these drone-like humans all be walking in great single-file columns all across the globe, in their respective countries. They seemed to have no objective at this moment. They just continued walking, and additionally had large numbers of animals been abducted and converted into these controlled, spaced-out, drone-like zombies in the same way, and indeed would be a part of these huge single-file lines of forever walking humans. Everything from tigers to snakes to cats to dogs, every type of animal imaginable, would join in these lines of walking humans, and seem to have no purpose other than to walk perpetually, though perhaps they would be made to serve another function at a later moment. And then the main invasion had occurred. I would never be shown what took place, the nature of it, but seems the ill-intended alien fleet must have descended into Earth's atmosphere globally, and as the vast majority of humans had been abducted and droned, it was a case then of simply taking over. I imagine then the small minority of those not abducted were those lacking the agreements in the consciousness that allowed that they could be, as everything we experience is agreement dependent, and agreements must have been present and secured between these aliens with most of humanity that allowed their abduction and subsequent control through technology, though nothing externally on any of the abductees could I see that was technological, so perhaps internal tech or control through a frequency bombardment. So it's very likely those not abducted were those who didn't have the agreements that most of humanity seemingly did, suggesting maybe those on their awareness processes that are releasing such agreements, which had them then able to avoid such an affected experience. Maybe then new friends who happened to be on the earth when this event occurs, if it does. At this point, the beneficial stepping up with the life aliens decided to engage antagonistically with the ill-intended ones, and my impressions were this wasn't the idea, as whatever the guides had attempted to encourage the beneficial aliens to do certainly wasn't an embroiling into a conflict with another alien species. For of course the idea is to get past all ideas of creation. We create ideas as we do, but we see all ideas for what they are, and endeavour to remain indifferent to them, to not cling on to or attach to them, lest we resign ourselves to their effects, and can be sucked back into a creation consequently. This is why the controllers like conflict, for as they present their ideas, if we engage with them, if we protest them, if we are drawn into a conflict with them, this is a form of agreement to the original idea that had motivated us into such action. For I can't oppose, protest, or conflict an idea unless I agree with it and bring it into my experience. How can you protest something if there is nothing there to protest? You need the idea that you wish to protest to first feature in your experience in order to protest against it, and regardless of how you view your motivations, agreement with any idea has you the effects of it, and part of the controller's game is to keep presenting ideas for you to engage with, to claim your attention, for you to protest with, etc. They set up wars, conflicts, they play both sides, everything as ideas that may have individuals deciding to take the opposing position. And again, to be in opposition of something, you must have that something in your experience to oppose. You must agree with it, and so it's very easy to keep engaging and latching onto these created ideas as we take our stances, as we choose our sides, etc. And so certainly the idea was not for the beneficial aliens to conflict with the ill-intended ones, as all involved are now locking themselves into the effects of the ideas they are embracing and embroiling themselves with. And like all created ideas, if we are fully engaged and immersed in whatever they might be, we are removed in our focus with the ease, and absent of the standing real in the nowness of the real awareness, indifferent to the ideas of creation, real position. That yes, all these ideas are present, the various creations that incite so many into a protesting and a conflict, but everyone has the free will right to create what they want, and we decide if we will agree with their creations or just remain detached and indifferent to them. And of course, every idea we do a protest, we do a conflict with, there are the ideas that we don't see behind the surface, the intent of the consciousness that created the ideas. For you can't have an idea without that which created it. You agree with an idea, you agree with the ideas of the consciousness it stemmed from, and so you can take on far more idea agreements than you bargained for. As you protest the latest controller atrocity, etc., you are inadvertently agreeing with a dark force consciousness that created the idea. That's inclination is to control, as the consciousness and the ideas it comprises of will yield their reflected nature as experience, as you agree with them, as you upload them to your simulation, generating a consciousness. This almighty battle would be predominantly fought on the ground, as the opposing alien species would bring their tech to bear, sophisticated sci-fi weaponry and such. Ultimately, though, the ill-intended aliens would have the upper hand, seemingly have the edge, and after a period of battling, so the aliens, who were initially approached to step up and be a beneficial aid to life and assist planet Earth in ways that evidently they didn't do in favour of the alternative option, conflict, they would withdraw now from the planet and return from where they came, no longer wishing to be a part of assisting galactically or with the Earth, at least as far as their agreements and decisions currently stand, as were revealed in this experience and future view. Both species then, with their attitudes, relatively unaware and unable to see through the ideas of creation, and so easily drawn into a conflict. And so the ill-intended aliens retained control of the planet, and perhaps the next phase of their operations would reveal what fate befell the humans, as throughout this conflict, those, the vast majority, they had control of through their technology, still were rather in their droned, zombified states, almost as though awaiting further instructions, or to be inputted with a function, like computers on standby. But just as the group and I had the initial audiences with the beneficial aliens and had been beamed aboard their ships, that even though we had their agreements, but what transpired had rolled out not exactly according to plan, we now also had secured ourselves an audience with the leaders of the ill-intended aliens. Throughout the conflict, I had just been in an observing capacity. From my real awareness, aside from a creation position, and only interjecting the personal self into the simulation where necessary, where engaging with the well-intended life-supporting aliens was concerned, and now also with these ill-intended aliens and their leaders. It would be an effort then to attempt to encourage them to not partake in their current decided course of action, to possibly offset their decision to indeed invade the earth and take it over in the way that they had the agreements that allowed that they could do so. This seemed to be the case, but it is always our decision and choice to do what we do, even if we know we can, even if we have the agreements. And so I and my group stood before a selection of armoured, ill-intended aliens, as we were to be transported momentarily into the presence of their leaders, and present our effort to have them decide differently, and an opportunity to have them maybe step up also and assist Duane and the guides, rather than be disruptors and destroyers. After all, the simulator is going dark for them also, if they choose to remain encased in it. The ill-intended aliens looked very human in appearance, as far as one could tell, unless they had shape-shifted or in some way altered their forms to that of human, and I would never see our audience with their leaders, as the experience would end there. But maybe I will be shown further details regarding this, or maybe it will play out on the physical, either in the way revealed or some other variation.